All right, we're talking today about the Montgomery bus boycott, which was one of the most important events of the modern civil rights movement and which gave rise to Martin Luther King Jr. as a national and international figure. Okay. Now, the thing to keep in mind is that in many ways, this event is a sort of coming right off of Emmett Till's murder. Okay. So yesterday we talked about the horrific murder of the 14-year-old young man Emmett Till, which was itself part of the larger reaction of violence on the part of white supremacists to the Brown versus Board of Education ruling, which was a great moral victory in constitutional history, which ended segregation, legal segregation, in theory, though it didn't, of course, had to be enforced, right? But it was a great moral victory, okay? And of course, white supremacists opposed it, okay? And then you had the murder of this young man, Emmett Till. And I said yesterday that it was sensationalized, right? I think that's probably the wrong word. I mean, it was shocking, right? Because it was a young man as opposed to an adult, because it was someone who wasn't from the South. So this shows, of course, Black communities in the North, that they are not safe from the violence that is threatening their relatives in the South, right? They can't visit the South. They can't visit their relatives. It shows that a young man can be murdered brutally and there can be no consequence legally for it. The justice system is anything but just. And it shows in how much danger Black people are in the United States at the time. And of course, this is internationally a huge scandal because the United States in 1955 is trying to portray itself as the moral good in terms of an alternative to communism everywhere else in the world. But of course, this seems to be, is the United States really a place of moral good, of moral integrity and high ideals when so much of the population is under such horrific oppression, right? So it really kind of is a scandal as well in the context of the Cold War. The other thing about it is the impact we talked about being big. Well, the impact is, of course, most felt in Black communities, right? Because, of course, they are the individuals who are in most danger, and their children are in most danger from this whole thing, right? And of course, there is attention given by the white media, and it's shocking to the middle class, but it is also something that goes away, right? That is forgotten about. And part of what is so frustrating on the part of African Americans is the sense that their suffering has gone unrecognized on the part of the mainstream and on the part of the federal government, right? We talked about with Elie Wiesel, what he says in his Nobel Prize speech about how suffering is part of part of what's terrible about suffering is the sense of being alone in it. And what you have to do is you have to, no matter how difficult it is, first of all, resist evil in yourself and in the world, and also accompany those who are suffering and be present to them. And that's very difficult to do, he talks about, right? Well, this is what the writer James Baldwin talks about is part of what's so terrible for African Americans is the oppression, but then also the lack of recognition or the being ignored, being treated as a non-entity, not being given respect as a person by being given the attention everyone deserves as a human being, right? So that's part of it, right? And so Emmett Till's horrific murder kind of goes out of the mainstream consciousness, right, for a time.